So RPG stands for role-playing game, right? Were you guys really role-playing when you played South Park? A lot of standard video game genres are, how do I put this, stupid? The purpose of a genre is supposed to be helpful in defining something, and yet most of them harbor completely different titles. A lot of them are a little too vague, like first-person shooter. You mean to tell me that Titanfall 2 is in the same category as Halo 2? Cause I gotta be honest, that just doesn't sit right with me. Both games are great, and they sure are first-person shooters, but Titanfall 2 has platforming and time manipulation and fucking mechs. Halo 2 has wacky physics and alien dinosaurs that sound like this. Or what about when you compare those two games to something like Counter-Strike, or compare that to a game like Bulletstorm? They don't look the same, they don't feel the same, and yet they're in the same category. Even when talking about something that seems pretty straightforward like platformers, you run into a similar issue. I think the genre most plagued by this, though, is definitely RPGs. RPGs could be a game with room to roleplay, like Breath of the Wild, games entirely dedicated to it, like Divinity 2, or they could have, in my experience, absolutely no roleplaying, like Dark Souls or Binding of Isaac, which is a game I didn't even know was considered an RPG. I think the game industry has slowly changed the definition of roleplaying from actually playing the role of a character to just being able to customize or grow your stats. And I get where this comes from. RPGs were initially attempts to recreate the feeling of D&D or other tabletop games. Almost all of them featured turn-based combat and characters that talk a lot, as well as the standard stat-based systems we've come to expect with the genre. What I don't understand, though, is the current use of the label. Literally any game with turn-based combat, a shit ton of dialogue, or just a basic stat system, whether it incorporates meaningful role-playing or not, is automatically called an RPG. Can you really compare the role-playing capabilities of a game like New Vegas to a game like Super Mario RPG? Even IGN wouldn't say this game makes you feel like Mario. Or for something more current, literally any Paper Mario game. Plus, there are games like Life is Strange, or really any Telltale game where you're definitely role-playing a character and making decisions for them, and they're not even considered RPGs. But forget the RP. What about the G? These games could be turn-based, they could be shooters, they could be open world, they could be roguelikes, and all of them will show up right next to each other on any digital game store. This confusion is the least apparent on Steam because the tags are largely user-created, but if you're a console, this can sort of mislead you. As a result of these terms becoming more and more vague, a lot of more specific genres have become common terminology, over the last decade especially. Metroidvanias are typically side-scrolling platformers with one large map that becomes more open to the player as they unlock new items and abilities. Souls-like games usually revolve around immersive environments and tough boss fights, and open-world survival craft is just a catch-all to describe anything resembling Minecraft. When you hear someone use terms like these to describe a game, it's a bit more obvious what that game is than if someone just said, oh, well, it's a shooting game. Huh? You mean like Halo? Or like The Last of Us? Or do you mean Chicken Shoot? I'm pretty aware that I'm making this out to be a bigger issue than it really is, but I'm the supreme ruler of this YouTube channel, and you are legally obligated to shut your face and listen to my pointless bullshit. Speaking of pointless bullshit, listing a game in the action genre has to be the least descriptive thing you could possibly do. Even dating sims have a little action in them, if you know what I mean. Pong, which is super primitive and one of the first games literally ever, is an action game. Do me a favor and take a second to just try and think of one single video game that couldn't technically be an action game. I'm 99% sure you had no answer for that, and I don't either. I guess you could argue that games like The Witness definitely lack action, but aren't you straight up using a controller or keyboard to perform actions? Isn't that what a video game is? Sure, maybe this is just plain semantics, but it upsets me, admittedly more than it should. But imagine booting up Netflix to do your nightly 2-hour scroll through their catalog without actually watching anything, and one of the categories just says live action. Wouldn't that be insanely unhelpful and ultimately pointless as hell? To me, this is the video game equivalent of that. There are a lot of other genres that I think are a little vague or inconsistent, but they just don't upset me as much. Like MMOs, for instance. MMOs at this point are pretty much only used to describe MMORPGs, but why don't we use this term to describe other games? Is a Minecraft server with 100 player slots not an MMO? What about the new Battlefield game? That game has lobbies with up to 128 players. That's pretty massive relative to War Sims, and it is online. Or how about fighting games? Don't quite a few games feature fighting that don't really fit into how we use that category? And even in the way we currently do use it, it's not like a lot of Smash players moonlight as Tekken fans or anything. I'll admit I am mostly nitpicking at this point, but put yourself in the shoes of someone who's new to video games. There's a lot of contextual understanding to the language of video games that a lot of gamers seem to think should be obvious to everyone. But if you're a new gamer who doesn't quite have their neckbeard yet, a lot of these genres and terms can be really confusing. Some of the names these genres have probably seem self-explanatory at first, but as I hope I've shown in this video, they can definitely be convoluted as hell. And sure, you could, I suppose, make the same argument about any art medium, but I think the amount of differences between any two sci-fi or horror movies, for example, is going to be significantly smaller than when you're comparing video games within their respective genres. This is mostly because video games are an interactive medium, and that means they have an X factor that other art mediums lack, which most people would label as how a game feels to play. This X factor is what I don't think is well accounted for in most game categories. Even semi-repetitive games within the same franchises, like, I don't know, Call of Duty, can have a totally different feel and style to them in every iteration. And just to show it's not all bad, some genres are perfectly descriptive and don't really have as much diversity. Sports games will almost always be straight up sports games, rhythm games are typically similar enough, and other than Dota 2, which is a monstrosity, I think most MOBAs have similar enough gameplay to have a lot of crossplay between different titles. And hey, basically every day people are coining new terms that better describe games for people unfamiliar with them, some of which I mentioned before. So in conclusion, standard video game genres can be unfortunately broad and inconsistent. However, gamers are adapting over time, and slowly but surely they're coming up with punchy and descriptive tags to better associate games with. Thanks for listening to me rant. I'm more than open to discuss any disagreements or points you have in the comments, but keep in mind that if you do disagree with me, you're nitpicking and biased, and I hate you. I've been Drew, and I'll see you guys later.
Hello, if you know what's good for you, you will subscribe to Drew Bills on youtube.com, and maybe you will ring that fucking bell, and maybe you will smash that like button. Think about it.
Hi, it's me, the guy whose video you just watched, Drew Balls. I just wanted to thank you for watching. I think I already said that, but between you and me, I need to stretch this video out to 8 minutes. So yeah, do everything that the Russian guy said, you know, ring that bell or else. And I hope you'll stick around for the next videos that I have coming up, because I'm going to rant about more bullshit. And I know this video was like a bit pointless, inevitably. But, you know, I thought it was kind of a good point. For us PC gamers, you know, us elites, it doesn't really apply to us much with the whole user-created tag thing on Steam. But whenever I look at a game on a console, it's like impossible to really break things down further than just like, oh, this game is action and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, like I said, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you later.